Good afternoon, everyone. This is Terry Abstein at the Division of Arts and Culture. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I am just going to go right ahead and pass the webinar over to Cassandra. I don't actually have any announcements.
Wow, no announcements. What a record day for us.
I know, right?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Cassandra White, a Grants Program Manager at the Division of Arts and Culture, and this is our How to Manage Your Grants webinar for 23-24. During the presentation, participants are muted and cameras are turned off. However, there is a chat feature available, so if you have any questions, please feel free to pop them in the chat. We do have some of our other team members here. Myself and Terry Abstein, and Terry will be watching the chat, and some of our other folks might pop in later. We'll also have time for a Q&A at the end of the presentation. Today we're going to cover what you need to know about managing your general program support or specific cultural project grant from the Division of Arts and Culture. That includes how to do your contract, how to amend your contract, how to request funds, how to document those funds, and how to do the required reports. This is the grant timeline. This information is all on our website and in your contract if you ever forget. The first step once you get your grant and once your grant has been funded is to submit your contract details. Contract details are the part of that is specific to your grant, your award amount, your budget, your deliverables. Once we review your contract details, we will generate your contract and send it back to you for your signature. Try to have your signed contract back to us by July 31st. Once your contract is executed, you can start requesting funds. January 30th, you'll have a mid-year report due. This is a short progress report asking about the first half of the grant period, July 1st through December 31st. June 30th, the grant period ends. You'll need to have requested all your payments and spent all your funds by this date. July 30th, your final report is due. There is a more in-depth report about your programs, your budget, your evaluation, and how many people you have reached. It has both statistical and narrative questions, and some of you are working on completing this for last year right now. Let's start with the contract details. To access your contract details, you will first log into the dosgrants.com, which is where you applied. Click on Grants on the purple bar. Click My Grants from the drop-down menu. You should be able to see grants for organizations that you're affiliated with. The most recent grant will have a grant number starting with 24. When you see it, click Details. And that's going to take you to your grant record details page. Scroll about 3/4 of the way down to the bottom for a section called Forms and Reports, and then look for the Contract Details form. The screenshot says View because they've already completed their contract details, but yours should say Edit. This is what your contract details should look like. You'll see on the right-hand side of the screen, there's a button to edit. If you don't see it, you may need to scroll to the right. If you can also see these tabs across the top: Deliverables, Budget, Scope of Work, and Contact Info. You need to review and, if necessary, edit each of those tabs. General program support and specific cultural project grants are split into 4 equal payments. Each payment has a deliverable and documentation. A deliverable is what your organization is doing. Documentation is what you can provide of proof of what your organization produced. You need to complete the deliverable and submit the documentation in order to receive a payment. Because there are 4 payments, there needs to be a deliverable and documentation attached to all 4 payments. Check your application to see what activities you said you would complete and use those as deliverables. Because a deliverable is about what you produce, deliverables and documentation don't need to be a direct reflection of your budget. For example, lots of people use their grant award for, let's say, paying their executive director, and that's perfectly fine, but at the same time, you didn't receive this grant to pay your director. You received the grant to produce arts and cultural programming in Florida. Your director is a necessary part of creating that program, but they're not the purpose. So no matter how you allotted your budget, your deliverable should still be about what your organization is doing for its arts and cultural programming. You also want to keep your deliverables simple and non-specific. We have some examples here. Museums often say they will execute at least one exhibition, theaters at least one production, at least one artist contract. You can choose whatever documentation makes sense to you. The easiest thing that is typically provide marketing materials or programs. As I said, you have 4 payments. You only need to come up with 3 deliverables. Deliverable 1 is auto-populated, and it's going to be the same for everybody. Do not change it. To complete the Deliverable 1, you will have to submit a certification from the Grants Management Quiz that we have linked at the end of this webinar, and you have to submit a timeline of your planned grant activities. Grant activities being your arts and cultural programming. We're going to talk more about requesting your first payment later. Point being, the first deliverable is easy to complete because we want everyone to have access to their funds as soon as possible. The next tab on your contract details page is your budget. You'll see that the budget from your application is already copied into your contract. Obviously, a lot can happen in a year, so you want to revise or update your budget so that you can do that. Specific cultural projects were fully funded, general program support was not. You will need to reduce your budget to match the award amount. I would recommend putting your grant funds into as few line items as possible. Reason being, when you turn in your final report at the end of the year, your actual spending of grant funds needs to be within 20% of your contract budget. This can be hard to track when you have grant funds spread out across categories. One large allowable expenses is so much easier to account for. And just a note, your contract budget should include cash match and in kind. You can change that too, just make sure that you have specific about your line items, meaning don't have miscellaneous, and make sure that you're aware of all non-allowable costs. This is a quick refresher on non-allowable and match-only expenses for updating your contract. You would have considered this when you submitted your application, but as a reminder, these cannot be anywhere attached to your project. A lot of these are obvious: no credit card or bank fees, no private entertainment, no food or drinks, no regranting, no scholarships, no lobbying, no taxes except payroll taxes. Those are fine. And just a reminder not to use state or federal funds as match. Also, you may not use funds that you already used for match for other Department of State grants. Your contract budget does not show where your match funds come from, but be aware of these restrictions when you submit your final report. Match-only funds means that you can have this on your contract, but they cannot be paid for with grant funds. That's phone bills, utilities, building maintenance, travel, space rental. These are all going to be in the guidelines, and if you have any specific questions, contact your program manager. The third tab is the scope of work. This is the easiest part. The scope of work is just the 4 deliverables together in a paragraph. If the deliverables are all different, just copy and paste them. If they're the same, you can condense them like here. The fourth and final tab is selecting a grant contact who will be responsible for all of the correspondence about this grant. This person needs to have a phone number and an email. You can select a contact from the list of people affiliated with your organization in DOS grants. You'll also have to select your address. Make sure this matches the address on your substitute W-9. If you're working on your contract details and you realize you need to add a new staff member, you can click on your organization's name in the grid at the top of the screen. That will take you to your organization profile. I have these screenshots cropped so they may not look quite the same on your monitor, but you'll want to find Manage Staff and then Add New Staff Member. And you'll just fill out this information, including the email and phone number. If the email or phone number is missing, you will get an error message when you try to submit the contract details. Make sure that you click Yes here at the bottom. If the person you're adding will receive an email asking them to confirm their account. Once they accept, they will be automatically added as a viewer. Let your program manager know, and your program manager can give them full permissions to request payments and submit reports and all of that. You'll look at your contract details, update your deliverables, your budget, your scope of work, and your contact information, and submit. Staff will review your contract details, then generate your contract. When your contract is ready, you'll be able to download it from this contract form section of your grant record details. You'll need to get your contract signed by an authorizing official and a witness. You can do digital signatures, just make sure that there's no Adobe security measures added to your documents. Once it's signed by both parties, you upload your entire contract, not just the page that you signed, and your current substitute W-9 into DOS Grants. You upload it to the same place, the contract form. If the contract has security restrictions that prevent us from signing, or if you have not included your substitute W-9, it will be returned to you. Our division director starts signing off on contracts and getting them executed on August 1st. Note, your contract cannot be fully executed if you're in non-compliance at that time. Usually people are in non-compliance because they didn't submit their final report on a previous grant. So make sure you get that in. If you want to check back, you can see the status of your contract here. Here are some things that might interfere with your contract being executed. We can't execute your contract if you're in non-compliance. The biggest reason for people to get into non-compliance is not submitting reports on a previous grant. If you had a grant for the 22-23 fiscal year, make sure your report is submitted. There are two places that need signatures in the contract, the acknowledgement page and the debarment, suspension, ineligibility page. If you do not sign the contract in both places, it will be returned to you. We cannot execute a contract if it's not signed by an authorizing official and a witness. We also can't execute your contract if the grantee doesn't have a UEI number in your organization profile. This is a newer requirement. UEI stands for Unique Entity Identifier. You can get one from sam.gov, linked here. It's pretty quick if you don't run into any issues. If you do run into issues, start a ticket with the Federal Service Desk. This is a totally separate entity from us, so we can't do anything behind the scenes to problem solve or expedite this. If you don't want to have one of these, start that process now. Okay, time for everyone's favorite part. You worked hard to get it done, and finally, it's time to get paid. Okay, to recap, the total grant award will be dispersed in 4 equal payments. Each payment needs a complete deliverable, and most importantly, you need to request the payments to receive them. It's not automatic. And here are the dates in which the funds become available. Basically, it's one payment per quarter starting after the execution of the contract. In any case, as I mentioned, the payment requests need to be submitted at the very latest by June 30th, 2024, which is the end of the grant period. However, since our fiscal year ends June 30th, Financial Services needs to receive all the payment requests by June 15th in order to be processed during that fiscal year. And since we also need time for 2 internal levels of approval in order to avoid delays, we recommend you submit the payment request by the first week of June. Payment requests approved between June 15th and June 30th will be dispersed in July. But let's start with the first payment. As we mentioned, the first payment is triggered by execution of the contract. However, to request it, you will need 2 additional documents, the timeline of grant activities and the grant management quiz certificate. This is an example of a quiz certificate. This is an example of timeline activities, and you will see that you can just write out what you're going to do in each month. Oops, sorry, friends. There we go. So yes, just write out what you need to do every month. And this is an example of the quiz certificate with the old, oh, this one has the new logo. At the end of the webinar, you can follow this link, and yes, we'll email you the PowerPoint, or you can go to our webpage, click on grants, and the grant management quiz is the last entry in the drop-down window. Then you will need to take the quiz, and if you score 100, you will receive the certificate at the email address you indicated in the form. We do not receive a copy of the certificate, so you will need to upload it to DOS Grants. All right, if you have executed the contract and you have the 2 required documents, the timeline of the timeline and the quiz certificate, you can request the first payment. To do so, you are going to log into your account in DOS Grants. Like I said from before, go to the dashboard and select My Grants from the grant drop-down window. Then from the My Grant page, click Details button on the side of your current grant to the Grant Details page. Now, the grant details page is the hub of your grant. Everything starts from here, so my recommendation is to bookmark this page. From here, you can click on the Request Payment button. This will launch the payment request page. Again, you will not be able to request a payment until your contract has been executed. Simply, the Request Payment button will not be there. It appears only after the contract has been executed. Okay, now we're on to the payment request page. select the deliverable. To do so, you click on the little square before the deliverable number. Enter the invoice period date. We made a change this year to simplify this step. The begin date must be July 1st for all payment requests. The end date must be the date of the payment request. And remember, it cannot be a future date. Use the ATTN field, the attention field, to name who in your organization submitted the payment. That way we can communicate with the right person in case we need to do so. Please do not put the name of your program manager here. And then you must upload all the required documentation for the deliverable. In this case, for payment number 1, we are uploading the timeline of grant activities and the quiz certificate. You do not need to upload the contract, it's already in the system. However, for payments 2, 3, and 4, make sure to upload all of the documentation listed for each deliverable. And here's how to upload the payment. Click on Add New File. Enter the title and description in the appropriate boxes. For this example, we're requesting the second payment. The deliverable description is execute a minimum of 1 exhibition. So the title of the payment documentation box can be the title of your exhibition, and the description should be the type of documentation you are providing. In this case, it would be marketing materials. At this point, you upload a file from your computer by clicking Select File, which will open a window if you're on a PC where you can find the file you wish to upload. After the file uploads, you will once again click Update. You should see the link View File. If you have more than one file to upload, you can repeat the process. So when you are done uploading, click on the Submit button. But wait, you are not done. Once you hit Submit, the payment request confirmation page opens. Here you can review the information and then check the authorization box, enter your electronic signature, and then click Submit again. Make sure you do this. This is one of the most common reasons people's payments don't get processed. Now you are done. The system will take you back to the hub, that is your grant record details page, and you will see the message payment request has been submitted. Also, you will see the payment status as requested. If the payment request was not submitted, the system will not take you back to this page. If that happens, look for an error message in red somewhere on the payment request page. It will describe what needs to be done and edited. Another hint that the payment request has not been submitted is that under the payment status, instead of requested, you will see the word preparing. Okay, to clarify, after October 1st and before you submit the second payment request, you need to have expended the first payment, completed the second deliverable, and submitted the expenditure log demonstrating how the first payment was spent. For the third payment request, you will have to expended the second payment, completed the third deliverable, and submitted the expenditure log demonstrating how all the funds you have received so far have been sent. The same thing for the fourth payment. You will have to expend the third payment, completed the fourth deliverable, and submit the expenditure log demonstrating how all the funds you have received so far have been spent. And here are some basic rules for the expenditure log. The expenditure log should only account for the expenditure that contains grant funds. You do not need to enter cash match and in-kind in the expenditure log. It's more work for you, and that's not necessary. Each line item needs to correspond with one transaction, which means one check or one EFT only. Please do not group transactions together. Please double check your contract details to see what budget categories contain the grant funds. If you put them in the wrong categories, we will have to return the expenditure log and it will delay your payment approval. You will be updating the same expenditure log during the entire grant period. Therefore, as you add expenditures, please check the total amount for each budget category. You can exceed or come short of the total for each budget category by 20% plus or minus, but no more. Again, we have to return to the expenditure log in that case. Okay, so here's how you complete and submit the expenditure log. So again, you go back to DOS Grants from the dashboard and select My Grants and then click on Details to go to that hub, your grant record details page. Once there, scroll down to the Forms and Reports block, the same one where you found the contract details before, but this time click Edit Log. Now you are on the expenditure log page. In order to start recording expenses, click Add New Record. This will take you to another page. And here's where you enter all the information about each transaction. You will only need to enter the info either in the invoice box or the transaction box. If you have an invoice number, you can use the invoice box, or you can enter a check number in a direct deposit reference number in the transaction box. In any case, one of these two boxes must have information. The payment date is the date on the check or the date that the bank executed the direct deposit. The payee is the name of the person or organization you paid. While it can be the name of one of your employees, it cannot be the name of your organization. The transaction total is the amount you wrote on the check or you sent through EFT. Under grant funds, you enter the amount you wish to allocate to grant funds. It can be a portion of the transaction total, or it can be the total. Obviously, it cannot be more than the total. Leave blank the cash match and in-kind boxes. The deliverable number should correspond to the deliverable for which you are reporting expenses. For example, if you have received the first payment, you are document how you spent those funds before requesting the second payment, you should choose number 1. And if you are about to request the third payment, sorry folks, if you're about to request the third payment, are documenting how you spent the second, choose number 2, and so forth. The budget item box is very important. Here you need to select the budget category for which you are reporting grant funds. So you need to check the contract details and make sure you are selecting the correct one. The description box is optional, but here if you wish, you can give a brief description of the expenditure. When all of that information is entered, click Update. The transaction will then appear in the expenditure log. And this is how the expenditure log will look. Here you keep adding new records until the expenditure log is complete and up to date. And you can review it to make sure it's correct, and all expenditures are allowable. Also, you can use the comments box if you need to include information that may help your grant program manager when reviewing the expenditure log. Finally, when you are done, you can click Submit to turn in the expenditure log. Now, after you click Submit, you will no longer be able to edit a submitted expenditure. If you realize there is a typo or you made a mistake, you can contact your program manager, who will return the line item or even the whole expenditure log so that you can click Edit and correct it. Also, if we find a mistake, we will return the expenditure log so you can correct it. If this happens, you will receive an email from your program manager explaining what you need to correct. And here, to recap, are a few things to remember about the expenditure log. 1. Check your contract budget before adding grant funds records to make sure the budget category is one you selected and agreed to in the contract. Check the total of each budget category recorded to make sure that you don't exceed the plus or minus 20% leeway. Also, to clarify and answer a question that comes up often, if, for example, one of your staff performs double duties and they fall into 2 different budget categories, you can list the same transaction total twice and allocate 50% of the total amount to each budget category. Okay, so after you submit a payment request, we review it, approve it, and send it to the Department of Financial Services. You should receive the funds in about 3 to 4 weeks from approval, depending on if you are receiving checks or direct deposits. If you don't request a direct deposit, you will receive a check. We recommend you request direct deposit because that's faster and it doesn't get lost in the mail. There is a form you need to fill out and submit to DFS, that is the Department of Financial Services, and here is the link for it. I want to add that we are not involved in this process. It's between you and DFS. If you have any questions about direct deposit, you can call DFS. The number is on the back of the form, and you can also check the status of your payment following the link provided on the bottom of this slide. There are 2 reports that you have to submit as part of your grant. The first is the mid-year report, and this is really quick and easy. It's essentially a progress report. It has 2 sections. The first is grant progress, which is text. This doesn't have to be a dissertation, but if you could say specifically what you've accomplished by this point, that would be ideal. The second is impact numbers, meaning how many opportunities for public participation and how many individuals benefited. There are separate questions for virtual participation. The second report that you need to submit is the final report, and this one's quite a bit more involved. This is going to ask about your activities, evaluation methods, impact numbers, and your budgets, including your cash match. The budget in the final report is going to be a bird's eye categories like the application. Your expenditure log should be completed when you submit your final report. You will need to provide support materials with sponsorship credit. We'll talk about that in a second. You can find both the reports here on the grant record details page. It's about halfway down the grant report section on the progress report section. The reports become available several months before the due date, and we will let you know by email. Once you submit, your program manager will review it. If we find something, we will get in touch with you. Remember, all grantees are subject to the Single Audit Act, and we will explain what that means for you. The Florida Single Audit Act states that anyone, individual or organization who expends more than $750,000 in state assistance within a fiscal year is subject to a higher standard of auditing. State assistance means any state funds, not just funds from the Department of State. There's a similar act called the Federal Single Audit Act, which has been on the books since 1984. The Federal Single Audit Act states that anyone expending more than $750,000 in federal assistance within a fiscal year is subject to stricter auditing. Now, my guess is that most people in this webinar, you're not expending anywhere near $750,000 in state or federal funds. And if that's you, you probably already know that. But what's new about the Florida Single Audit Act is that everyone who receives state funds is now required to submit a form stating whether or not they've crossed that threshold in state or federal funds. You can do that in DOS grants, so I will show you how. The FSAA is a little different than the other requirements we've talked about because it's tied to your organization and not your grant. So you'll need to navigate to your organization profile. If you're still on your grant record details page, you can click your organization name, or you can select organizations on the purple bar and then select View My Organizations on the drop-down menu. Because the FSAA is related to your organization's fiscal year, you'll need to have a fiscal year end date listed in your organization profile before you can submit the form. If you don't have one, you need to change yours, click Edit Organization. Once your fiscal year end date passes, you won't be able to change it yourself. If this happens, contact your program manager. If you have a fiscal year end date that's listed, it's correct. The fourth tab, you will click on the fourth tab reading Single Audit Act. The day after your fiscal year end date, you'll see a pending record here and a button to edit. The form is going to ask you to confirm your fiscal year end date, whether you share a FEIN with a larger entity, and whether you've expended more than $750,000 in state or federal funds. That's not state and federal funds combined, it's state or federal funds. If you say that you have expended that $750,000 in state or federal funds, you'll be prompted to submit a financial report. The form and the financial report are due 9 months after your fiscal year end date. The idea being that you may need some time to wrap up accounting. As of now, we don't get a notification in the system to trigger grantees to submit their FSA forms. We're working on it, but we don't have it yet. If you have any questions about the FSAA, here are a few resources. You can follow these links from the PowerPoint, which will be sent to you after the conclusion of today's webinar. The final piece of reporting that you are responsible for is the Notice of International Travel. The Office of International Affairs is now part of the Division of Arts and Culture, and as part of our responsibilities to facilitate trade and cultural exchange with Florida's international partners, we ask that all grantees notify the Department of State of any international travel at least 30 days before the date of the international travel. 30 days before the date it's to commence, or as soon as feasible after forming travel plans. To do this, we ask that you complete a form on our website. It's located under the Grants tab in the Grants Forms and Documents section. And here are some links for useful information: the guidelines, the rubric, sample applications that will be for next year, our DOS grants link, and our calendar. And here are the division staff and program managers with their emails. We will also be emailing out a copy of this webinar with the slides so that you can use the links in this contact list. And now we have time for questions and answers. Terry, do we have anything in the chat that we need to address?
Hi, Cassandra. Thank you so much. We didn't have a whole lot of questions. So I'm just gonna, some reminders, I guess. There was a question about direct deposit. And so this actually is worth repeating. You do not have to renew your direct deposit information every year unless you have changed your banking information. If you've changed your banking information, the money goes into a black hole and then we have to figure out what happened to it. So sometimes it gets returned to financial services if your bank actually has closed the account. We've had a situation this year where the bank didn't actually close the account and the payment was sitting in the organization's old bank account. So if you change banking information or you're planning on changing banking information, do that as soon as possible, and just to be aware of the fact that there might be a little bit of a hiccup. However, direct deposit is absolutely the fastest and least error prone method of getting your payment. The Postal Service loses checks all the time. I did put in the chat before the webinar started the direct link to the quiz and the direct link to the grants management page on our website, where we will post the recording along with a PDF of the slides. The recording will also be available on our YouTube channel. And I'm going to also paste the link to the quiz in answer to someone's question here so that you can see it in the question box also. And just remember some kind of dates. So we will not, even if you've finished your contract details and it's been approved by your program manager and you have your contract and you signed it and you uploaded it, we're not going to start executing those until after August 1st, because we want to make sure that final reports are in. And then that's a process. So there's like 700 and some of you guys, and there's like there's like 4 of us. One person is doing the signing for all of those contracts. And it is a process. Okay. So you have to bear with us. That first payment is slow and it takes a while. Use your match dollars. I would say give it a full 4 weeks after you have submitted it and your program manager has validated your payment request to ask where your dollars are, because it really and truly goes through like 4 different departments with multiple approvals until the actual money is dispersed. We don't write those checks ourselves. So that first payment takes longer. After that first payment though, it's a much quicker process. So I know everyone is anxious to get their funds for the next year. Just kind of bear with us, because some of that is completely outside of our purview. It goes like even beyond the Department of State to the actual state treasury. So there's that reminder. And I think there are some questions now. Can we email the quiz? So there will be a follow-up email that's generated by the GoTo platform that has a link to the quiz, and it has a link to the grants management page directly in it. So yes, you will get that. What else? For the final report, do we fill in 100% of the one-to-one match, but not the full amount of the match we included in the application? So for the final report, if your specific cultural project, you will report 1-to-1. If you have a general program support grant, you should report what you put in the application, because basically you're matching your full budget for general program support to your grant dollars. If you have a multi-million-dollar budget and that seems a little excessive, I will say, talk to your program manager, just make sure that they understand that you aren't doing your full budget and show at least one-to-one. But we do ask that you show your full budget for general program support because we report these numbers to the National Endowment for the Arts. Where can you sign up for direct deposit? Barbara, there is actually a link in the PowerPoint. And if you contact your program manager here at the division, they can share that link to the form with you. It's actually a form that you have to physically fill out and mail to them because of the information that's in it. They ask that you mail it. So it's not a quick and easy process. If you've already done the quiz in a previous grant year, do you need to do it again? Yes, it's a different quiz. It's a different certificate. We actually are required to demonstrate that we provide training to our grantees, and so we have to have new information annually to show that you've attended the webinar and taken the quiz. Just to clarify the final report, should we just provide one-to-one matching portion in the budget? So this does actually bear repeating. If you have a specific cultural grant, you only need to report one-to-one. If you have a general program support grant, you should be reporting your entire budget as match. If it's exhaustive and extensive, just let your program manager know that you're not doing the entire thing, but we do ask for it because of the numbers that report to the NEA. Our expenditure logs due 10/1, 1/1, and 4/1 for the fourth deliverable. So expenditure logs are due when you request the next payment. So there's no expenditure log for the first payment. There's an expenditure log for the second payment showing how you spent the first payment. There's an expenditure log for the third payment showing how you spent the first two payments. The last expenditure log with the full amount of funds that you've expended will be with the final report. I will say though, some folks don't spend their dollars on a quarterly basis. Some of their projects or the things that are in their general program support budget don't happen until later in the year. So you might not be requesting your payments exactly on 10/1 and 1/1 and 4/1. It's okay if you request your payments later. Let's see if I missed anything up above. Is there a page on the website that includes variations of the logo? Sarah answered that. So we do not have our logo posted on our website. Please contact your program manager for the logo itself. And if you want a variation that's different than the colored one, we do have full white, we do have full black, and then a couple different color variations, horizontal, vertical. So if there's something specific you need, just reach out to your program manager. I think that's it. I think we got all the questions. Cassandra?
We do have one just now about can we start working on the expenditure log before the contract is executed to stay on top of it? I personally wouldn't recommend it just in case there is something that gets returned in your budget so you don't enter things incorrectly. But I do not know if it is possible. Do you, Terry?
Well, it's only July 5th. So it seems a little bit premature. You might not have had expenditures. When we say expenditures, we mean money that has already been paid. It is a good idea to make sure that your budget and your deliverables are approved before you do that. But if you just absolutely know, I guess you can go ahead. We may have to return it to you if it doesn't match up though. So just be cautious. Wait, I saw something here. If we sent forth deliverable before the final report and had received it all already, does that change anything on the final report? No, it doesn't change anything on the final report. You'll be reporting actual expenses in the budget on the final report. You may need to update something on your expenditure log if you find that that doesn't match up. But no, that doesn't change anything. Who in the organization needs to notify international travel? So Deborah, I would say whoever is managing the grant at your organization should do that. Just communicate with the program manager here at the division. Just because they'll know who you are, they communicated with you before, we'll know what organization it goes to, and we can track that. So I would just say whoever is typically the grant manager on your side. Does international travel pertain only to performing artists? So if you are traveling internationally for your organization, if you've been invited to speak or perform, you have some sort of a cultural exchange going on with an organization in a different country, those are the types of things that you should report. We don't need to know if it's personal travel, just if it would be classified as business would be what you would report. Dan says he's already submitted his contract details. Yay, Dan, you're ahead of us. It sounds like you can consolidate the grant funding line items in the budget. Can I have the form reopened? Yes, Dan, what organization are you with? Just type it in there and we'll get it open for you so you can work on that. Sarasota Pops. Okay, Cassandra will make sure that she sends that back to you so you can make edits. I know we went fast. There's a lot of information. We are always happy to help you. You can send us an email. If you just do better by phone or by a virtual meeting, we can do that as well. We're happy to screen share and kind of talk you through things. Whatever you need, we definitely want you to be successful and to do it the right way. So don't hesitate to reach out to us. Why does budget for contracts list only the expenditure and not the income?
I mean, the basic answer is that we can't hold you to what income you will make. That's the basic answer, is we can't contractually hold you to how much you will make, especially for ticket sales and such.
That was a good answer, Cassandra. Okay. If we don't have any other questions, keep an eye out for that follow-up email. It has the links to the quiz, links to where the video will be posted. So right now it has last year's How to Manage Your Grant webinar, because we're still doing this one and it has to process, but we will get it posted within the next day. But you can certainly work on the quiz and we will have a PDF of the slides available on that page also. So with that, we are going to end the webinar. And as always, we're here to help. If you need anything, feel free to reach out to us. Thanks so much for being here, everyone.